So now we have a fair idea of what is a DBMS, okay, how the tables are connected with each other, okay. So we know all that. Now we will see what is SQL. So before I start with SQL, we write it as SQL and we pronounce it as SQL. And why we pronounce it as SQL? Let me just show that to you. Okay. So SQL is nothing but structured query language. Okay. Okay. So when you are studying, okay, if you're studying, if you're in college, you will generally call it as SQL, like you will call with individual letters. But when we work, we call it as SQL. SEQUEL. Okay. So if you say QUEL and SE. Okay. So these are the things which is used to call it SQL. So now going forward, you should practice calling it SQL because that is what it is called in industrial terms. Okay. Okay. So what is SQL? SQL stands for structured query language. SQL lets you access and manipulate database. Okay. Let's first concentrate on the first 2 points. Okay. SQL is called the structured query language. Why? Because query is nothing but you are querying your database. Now, for example, there is a table. Let me give you an example of a table. Okay, imagine this is a table which is also stored in our database. Well, this is, I going forward in the class, I am going to show you where and all it is stored. But right now it is an Excel. Okay, so just imagine we have this table in the Excel in the database, and I want to know the answer of my question, which is how many people are there in my employees table, or how many employees do I have. So what do? I can just take a count, right? I can just take a count and I can say, okay, I have 108 employees who are, part of my employees table. Okay. So what I did first, I asked the question, how many employees are there? Okay. Same way, I can query or I can ask my database a question, which is a query, and database or the database management system, which is the DBMS, what it will do is it will return the answer to my question. Okay, through the application I am using, whether I am using a browser or any software like SQL developer or anything, right? So it will return it there. So this is a query which I am asking to my database returns me an answer to that. So that's why it is called a query language. Why it is called structured? See, English has a grammar, right? English language or any language has a grammar. Now, when I say for SQL, it is nothing but very plain English, right? Every syntax we use there is just English, which is structured a bit differently, okay, to get the results. Now, that's why SQL has its own grammar. You can consider SQL as an English language itself with its own set of rules for grammar. You are here to learn only those rules, and that's it. Because SQL is so easy, it's just English language, plain English language. Okay, just the grammar is different, and that's what makes it different, right? So that's why it is called structured, because it has its own grammars and own rules, and it is a query language. So that's why SQL is nothing but structured query language. Okay. Now, SQL lets you access and manipulate database. Now, what does that mean? SQL will let you access a database. That is, you can get hold of your data. You can pull data from your database, right? So if you want to know that, okay, how many employees do I have? You can write that code in SQL, and you can send it to your DBMS. DBMS will fetch the data for you and it will send you back, right? So you are here, you ask your DBMS using SQL. SQL is the language which DBMS and the user understands, right? SQL is the language which the DBMS and the user understands. So you write the code in SQL. Now this code is interpreted by DBMS in a form which the database can understand. This is a database. This database. So DBMS, what it will do is it will interpret SQL, the language, in the form which the DBMS can understand or the database can understand. Okay, it will fetch data from there and it will pass it on from SQL to the end user. That is why it's called, you can access database as well as you can manipulate your database. Now what does manipulation means? So for example, there are students in a class, example class 9. Now the final exams are over, right? Recently we had 10th exam for the boards. Now everyone has to be moved to one class higher. Now you need to change the classes, right, for the students. Now previously they were in 10th class, now they will be going to the 11th class. Are you going to enter new records for all the students over and again, where you already have the data of the students? No, right? What you're going to do is, you already have the database of the students, you are just going to increment the class number. So previously they were 10, they were in 10th, now they are in 11th. Okay. So this is how you manipulate your database. Next, SQL became a standard of the American National Standard Institute. Okay, SQL became a standard of the American National Standard Institute, which is the ANSI, in 1986 and of ISO in 1987. Now, why is this point very important? SQL can become a part of any institute. How does it matters to us being the end user of SQL or being the data analyst, right? How does this matters to us? Now see, in market we have various kinds of SQL languages, right? So for example, you have Oracle, you have Redshift, you have MySQL, you have NoSQL, you have many things, you have big data, you have many such SQL languages. If you see after this session, just go and Google, okay, what is the difference between Oracle SQL and MySQL? The syntax, mainly see on the syntax, what you will see is there are no major difference on the major part of it. Only the syntaxes here and there changes. The way maybe a date is written in MySQL and Oracle SQL and T-SQL. T-SQL is nothing but Transact SQL, which is used by Microsoft SQL developer. Okay, so the syntax is where it changes. Rest all of things are the same. So if you know Oracle SQL, it will be very easy for you to know any of the SQL languages, whether it is MySQL, whether it is Redshift, which is from Amazon, or whether it is T-SQL by Microsoft, right? Any of the SQL languages you have, you can very easily learn and adapt to, because there's literally no difference in the basics. To make this happen, that there shouldn't be any change in the basics, okay, this was integrated to ANSI and ISO, so that the basics remain the same and standard across any of the languages. 12 is added to the institutes, and that's how this matters to us. Okay, so I hope we are clear on what SQL is and how it is a standardized language.